going to go ahead and get started, and we are videotaping today. This will go on the iTunes U channel, is that right? Okay, for UCLA and for the department. I'm Christine Berg, professor, distinguished professor in the department, and I have the pleasure of introducing my very fine colleagues from the Netherlands. So I'm going to give you a few minutes of background on this project, and then I'll come back and do a little bit of wrap up at the end. So DANS, the Digital Archiving and Networking Services of the Netherlands, is a very interesting place. And I won't steal too much of Andrea's thunder about the specifics of it, but it's a very important digital archive in the Netherlands that goes back to pre-digital days. And it's important not only for the content, but for its breadth. It's important in Europe, and they're involved in many different kinds of research projects that you will hear about with fingers all across Europe, and international collaborative projects as well. Another thing that's interesting about DANS as an organization is that they are part of the Royal Academy of the Arts and Sciences of the Netherlands, which is roughly the equivalent of our National Academy of Sciences. And that's not the structure with which we run data archives in this country. But that also gives them access to local research funds. They do have their own research operation. Andrea is the head of research, and they're able to bring in visiting scholars. So I got involved as one of their visiting scholars, and our other collaborators who are mentioned on the poster, Herbert Van de Sample from Los Alamos National Labs, who's been a collaborator of ours for some time, and Andrew Cholor of the Australian National Data Service, switching the same acronyms in different order, ANDS, is another partner in this project. So we're spread across several continents, and when I came in as a visiting scholar, being told I really didn't need a portfolio, I could just hang out and ask interesting questions for a few weeks at a time, and they would fund up to 4 visits in a year. I started asking questions early on about who uses this archive, who's putting data into it, who's taking data out of it, what are they doing with those data, what role do the archivists play in recruiting data and in disseminating data, and the answer to all those questions, pretty much we don't know. So I said, there's my research project. And it's turned into a terrific project because there's been surprisingly little user study of digital data archives. And this is also a group that's willing to be studied. They're very open, and spirit of open data, they're willing to be open themselves and to be interviewed. And we have interviewed all of the archivists already, and we want to interview people who contribute data and people who retrieve data. But figuring out who those users are also got us digging into what we could find out about the population. And that was best done through the logs, the web logs, because every digital archive has some kind of log of who uses things. That's when Andrea brought Henk into the project, because Henk is a senior programmer analyst for DANS, but he comes from a background in the arts and is wonderful at visualizing data and helping us comb through it. So having done a lot of work on logging data earlier in my career, this was a chance also to go back and revisit some of those questions. So we're learning quite a bit about the research methods and what you can glean from those kinds of user traces. So with that, we put together our first piece, which is a poster that we presented at ACES this week. And we had actually paired posters, this one and then the one open data that Rena led that we had side by side. We had terrific traffic, great interest in these. And this is the first of papers. This was the first of presentations from the project. So we welcome all of your input, because this is, I'll be back in the spring and we'll be taking it to the next stage. And we put in a paper for the Digital Curation Conference, which is in Amsterdam in February, and DANS is one of the hosts of that. And assuming that is accepted, Milena and Ashley will be going to work with DANS and helping move that bridge forward. So with that, Andrea's going to give a 10 or 12 minute overview of the project, and then Hank's really going to dig into the data and the log things, and then I'll come back and do a bit more wrap up, try to bring the threads together, and we'll have plenty of time for discussion.
Okay. Thank you very much for this lovely introduction, Christine, and thank you all for coming and welcome. And I hope you can hear me over there. So should I speak up a bit, or is this okay? So I thought the doors. Noise doesn't come from the cafe. So I thought I should not take too much time from my esteemed colleague who did all this hard work, but I should tell you a bit, setting the scene a bit and telling you a bit in which kind of research environment DANS as an institute is operating. And when I said it, I thought, okay, instead of a lot of slides, maybe I show you a poster. Now the poster is not very much discriminating, and we are putting a link in to the slide share if you are, I'm not sure you are allowed to surf while you are listening, but this poster can be found on Kati Berner's website. There was a collaboration with her, it's in a high resolution there. So what you see there is actually the Dutch research landscape through the eyes of Narcissus, which is another of our services, and it's an online portal to all the stuff, some of the publications, a lot of the local funded projects, and yeah, I think the richness is actually the stuff we have in the expertise, and those little almost not visible dots are the 8,000 professors, full professors, associate professors, allocated or assigned to one of the 14, which you can also not see, universities, but you see the shape of that country there, and that's the Netherlands. Yeah, so we are sitting in the northwest corner of Europe, and it's a fairly small country. We have 16 million inhabitants around with it. We have 14 universities, and those professors are affiliated to them, and why we have a network is actually a mode 2 effect. If you are familiar with science and technology studies jargon, then you know that there has been an institutional break between the traditional university, where you were affiliated to one university and had to be loyal to this university, and nowadays people have often different and multiple affiliation, and that's what you see in the network. So we are a small country, a small kind of academic community, and still we have an amazing amount of different organizations. These are all these kind of points here. And I think in our database, in the Narcissus database, we have about 600 different organizations which are somehow related to research, bigger and smaller. And in them, DANS is one. Yeah? So DANS is under the roof, as Christine already explained, of the Royal Netherlands Academy, one of the remainder of the library of the Academy actually, but with an archival, with a main focus on archival services, on digital research data. This is kind of bread and butter next to the research information system for us. And DANS was pioneering and already starting at the beginning of 2000. Henk was one of the designer of that system, starting an electronic self-archiving system, which is called EASY, which allows researchers to upload their own data sets, so that you don't have to make very complex steps. And that is also a time where we hadn't had any Dropbox or that kind of stuff. I think this is also pre-Google Drive, yeah. So that was a way via a web interface to actually upload your own data set, and then be sure that this is kind of described according to Dublin Core and probably can be retrieved also in the long term. This is what we are focusing on. We say we are for the social sciences and humanities. We wanted to make sure that our files are can still be retrieved in 50 years and 100 years, and if you know anything about the digital, then you know how complex that is. Yeah. So, and we are also devoted to the long tail of kind of individual researchers, because there are a lot of data archives connected with large institutions. The astrophysicists, for instance, in the Netherlands, they have their own digital archive. They don't need us. We would also not be able to ingest them, by the way, but okay, this is the community we are dealing with, and I think you tell a bit about that in a minute, what kind of audience or communities we really have data sets on. Now I show you this kind of, that's a bit European kind of, that's actually PowerPoint visualization, and I shouldn't have done this. Okay, anyhow. But DANS as a service institute only since 5 years has a research group, and we basically have a research group at DANS because our directors thought we should have something. Yeah. So things are developing so rapidly. Yeah. And what should an archive then actually do? Now, a digital archive is very much depending on technological development. This kind of gives us, I don't know, sleepy nights, because we have to maintain a system which needs to run, and at the same time our archivists but also our users wants to have all kind of fancy stuff also overnight to be implemented. Yeah? So when we started the research group, we thought, okay, there is this life cycle of scientific knowledge production, and there is the other life cycle you often see in policy documents on the around data. And we actually have, with our tiny little group, we are 4 or 5 people, we are all over the place in different research projects. So some of the research projects or research infrastructure projects are on the European level, and some of them you might want to check out later. One is quite successful and very visible, is ERI, the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure. They got a second funding round now. They had 4 years or 5 years in the first round. They have another 4 or 5 years. They're trying to bring together all archives, not only digital, because most of that archival material is actually paper still, not digitized, which deal with testimonies of the Holocaust. And then our people, the DANS people, they think about what kind of infrastructure could we build or contribute to build to accommodate these archives. And one of the crucial points, people like Mike Priddy and Linda Reinhardt are busy at the moment, is to actually fiddle out a model or develop a model to identify on which level different archives are situated. Yeah? So some of them have already large digitized stuff, so they have other needs than an archive which probably barely has an index on the website. Yeah? So, and the large European projects sometimes seem to overlook that. They are very much influenced by ICT development and not so much by the requirements of the concrete users and communities. EU-DAT is another European project, a large infrastructure project which tries to develop all kinds of services which sometimes sound a bit like the services we also have in the commercial world. So there is a business or B2 share, there is a B2, I forgot about this, there are a lot of B2, but they sound a bit like Dropbox and collaborative environments, but they try to do this in a way that you also can control privacy better, and that's better tailored to research needs than just information exchange. Now, I'm involved in a project called CEDA, that census data. One of the data sets we have, or data collections actually, concerns the Dutch historic census that comes traditionally as books. In those books you have tables. Those tables have been photographed first, and then we had a website with an index you could search through. And then we got another money, Peter Dorn got another money, so that was what's typed into Excel files. We still have seniors which worked with the statistical office, which is the original owner of the data, and they are correcting still the Excel files, but the CEDA project turns that into linked data. So we have now a Sparkle endpoint, and we do a lot of data cleaning to get a kind of a way that you can search through 14 years of instances in the census. So the census starts in 1795, but has been asked every decade. Yeah? So you only have sparse kind of time points, only 14, and every time they ask other questions, because the census is asked to inform your government at that very time, and they have not thought to be kind of to path a way for researchers who wanted to ask what was the married population in Amsterdam in those 200 centuries. Yeah? Or 200, 2 centuries, 200 years. Thank you very much. So now how many people live there seem to be a quite actually simple question, but it isn't, because the boundary of what is called Amsterdam has changed all over the place. I should wrap up, so we can talk about those projects. No, actually, I'm finished already, yeah. And you can take over. So this gives you a bit of an impression what we do. And the star here in the middle, this is actually something we wanted to do already. And then Christine came and we got the possibility to do this very properly, namely to also look in data culture, so to look into really the communities who are using data. And that we did by looking into our own traces, and that's you now.
Well, thank you, Andrea, for an excellent introduction of DONS. Actually, the next slide is my introduction to DONS. What is DONS? It's just, of course, the successor of several other institutions, and it goes back, the digital history goes back through the 1960s. You have these cards with census data or survey data on it. At the moment, in August we had 30,000 data sets. I should say a data set in DONS speak is a collection in Dublin core speak. So it's a kind of cohesive set of files stemming from a research. We were mainly having three kind of services. We also have an educational services, but apart from that, services that involve servers and digital things and websites. We have EASY as a self-archiving of scientific data. Narcis, Andrea mentioned it already, has scholarly information in the Netherlands. And we run a Dataverse NL, that's a Netherlands version of Dataverse. Each of them has their own specific task within the scientific data landscape. For the research we did with Christine, we focused on EASY, the self-archiving of scientific data, and well, we had EASY is mainly a website, and it has you can deposit your data on it, and you have to fill in a form which mainly has Dublin core metadata on the data set. You can upload files, and then it's a data set. It's been looked into by archivists, and then if archivists have no objections and everything is okay, then it's published. You can, as a depositor, assign categories to these data sets, and that's the graphics here below. We have it in a bit more readable fashion. So you can try to, what's the thing? The graphic is the ratio between number of downloads and the number of available data sets for specified disciplines. So we have social sciences, archaeology, behavioral sciences, humanities, life sciences, and medicine through the years. So if it's on the one level, then you have just as many downloads that year as there are data sets. If it's going more greater than one, then you of course have more downloads than there are data sets. So for instance, if it's 2, then it means the average data set in that discipline is downloaded twice that year. And remarkably, we have the largest part of our collection is of archaeological data. That is because there is an obligation to deposit archaeological excavation research data. But the main thing that is downloaded is social sciences at the moment, and well, archaeology is catching up because probably there are more interesting data sets in archaeology as well the last few years. This slide is the previous one. It's the same as the other one. You see, archaeology is the main the tag of archaeology has the most data sets in it. Scientific research data, it's easy to say, well, we are a repository for that, say, on scientific research data. So what is scientific research data? I'm not a science person, so to speak. I'm just a software developer. So I think up a definition of scientific research, and it says it's any data that is subject of, instrumental to, or the result of scientific research. And of course, in the case of EASY, that is digital scientific research data, and that mainly says it can be stored on a hard disk. To speak of any data that is subject of scientific research, and especially the instrumental tool. For instance, if you cut a tree and you take a photo of the remaining stem, you get these ear rings on them, and maybe if you put this picture of the ear rings through a software system, it can give you all kinds of interesting stuff about the years that the tree was growing, the climate, the weather conditions, etc. You can even use it to get the date of other wooden objects from this triggering data. And well, there's an example of the use of software in data, and software as it is also just data, and of course how you use the software from to get the subject data to the resulting data, that's another question as well, and that should be part of the metadata, of course. And the metadata, I mean, in this sense, can be very large. I did a course in R, this is statistical programming, and they are very fond of scripting your research. That means that every step in your research can be done again by just running the script again. So in comes Christine, and she poses the question, who uses the digital archive? That's a scientific question. Of course, there are also lots of other questions around the archive, and they can be managerial or administrative. The management wants to know certain things about the archive. The administrative people wants to know, for instance, who is depositing data in draft and doesn't submit their draft data sets, and why should that be? This is all information that is somewhere dispersed in the system. Of course, not the answer to the question, but then you have to have the depositors, for instance, who don't submit their data set. You have to know their email address, for instance, and this first thing, these first few slides are about sort of the theoretical thing behind data collecting about the data. I could have used made another slide of this, but you can easily comprehend yourself. You have this data that is the core of our archive, the data which we just saw, the subject and the result and the instrumental data, the software for instance. And you have this data about all this data. How is it used? When is it downloaded? When is it uploaded? Who does the downloads? Who does the uploads? How frequent do they search? What kind of things do they search? This is all data that is around this core data, and it's kind of dispersed because, for instance, the metadata of data sets is in XML files in the system. It's not queryable right away. You have to read all the XML files. The download history is there again in the log files, for instance. And if you want to combine these things, that's could answer interesting questions. But well, we'll see, because I'm using water a lot in these slides. Of course, it's a cliche. Data is like water nowadays. People expect Wi-Fi just as they want running water out of the tap. It's ubiquitous. We cannot live without water/data. So the interesting metaphor we have here is in the research, in the repository. We have this research data, we have metadata, we have the index data, and outside the repository you have search engines, we have links on web pages, we have common knowledge, and in between, on the surface of the water, so to speak, are the user and the usage of this data below, and they bring in data from the world level, so to speak, world data, it says. You can, of course, use that. If a link on a page links to a data set, say data set A, and on the same page you find a link to a data set B, then you can know somehow they have something in common. They are linked outside the system, but you can make that a link inside the system as well. So that's common knowledge and search engines saying something about your data. And where is the data? I'm not sure if I know what this slide is about then. Yeah, but I spoke about it already. You have difficulties in accessing the data. You have treatment of the data. Of course, sometimes data in the raw form cannot be used directly. You have to extract certain kind of data. And well, this is a kind of saying we've been looking into log forms, into metadata to get answers for the questions Christine was asking, that Andrea was asking. Well, maybe if we look more forward, this was looking backward, and we can also look forward and say what kind of data do we have to gather, and what kind of operations, basic operations, do we need to do on this basic data to get answers that might be questioned in the next coming 5 years, to better anticipate these questions. And that can be questions from a scientific point of view, it can be questions from a managerial point of view, or an administrative point of view. So this will be continued later on in the slideshow for a best recommendation of how to set up an observatory on the repository, so that from so you have your data and your visualizations ready for answering questions and doing more further investigation into the data about the data in the core. So that leaves us with the last slide of the theoretical introduction. There is a data cycle. You collect data, probably you store the data somewhere, you do analysis of the data, and you have data influx. Data from outside comes into it. For instance, you have IP addresses, and you can gather from which part of the world the geographical coordinates. You can gather from some third-party API, and this kind of continues because, well, one day you ask me this, and you perform a data collection and analysis for that question. That leaves a second kind of data on your system, which can be involved in the answering of another question. That's why this circle of continuous data analysis, data working on data, okay, and influx of data. So it says work with data, elaborate on data, play with it. That's the important part, play with it, and keep data traceable, process repeatable, and research reproducible. So we had mainly the management log files. Here it says it has history behind it. Here it says the system dispense events on certain occasions, and that's what's logged into certain fields in the log files, the management log files. So the fields are grouped like daytime, mnemonic, a username, roles, a username if there is, if the person is logged in, groups the client IP address, and then some fields depending on which kind of event was triggered. About visualization, this is about what you see if you take all the log files from the 4-year research period. At least this is something you cannot comprehend immediately. And then if you take just this information from very common command line, you can visualize all the information that was not readable like this. So you know from the size of the log files is about 2 megabytes for each day, and there are some days that were outliers. And also you can, this little tweak of the script that is creating this graphic, you can see the red dates, there are no log files at all. With some third-party information like which IP addresses are bots, you can easily make visible that, and it doesn't have to be for the big audience, but perhaps only visualize it for the research group, that Google is one of the biggest users of the system. In 52% of the days, on average and per day, one agent is responsible for 52% of the logged events, and in 1,037 out of the 1,086 days of the 3-year period. That agent was a Google bot. Right. So Google all the way. Here we have a student from the Utrecht University, this purple one, which was downloading a lot of archaeological data sets and using a script to do that. The light blue one here is a Russian hacker trying to do SQL injection. Another way to visualize what use of the system can be done could be easily done with scripts and doing it all the time. Just reading the log files, getting some information from third-party systems where are the IP addresses coming from. And then you could see that, for instance, the West Coast has a lot of interest in easy. In contrast, so this is some daily pulses, some per day visualizations. If we take the users, the logged-in users, the previous slide, it could be machines which were visualized. Now we have logged-in users, machines don't log in. These are persons. Of course, Europe is largely covered, but here it's interesting for the United States that there are more persons on the East Coast interested in EC, in contrast to the huge interest from machines on the West Coast. And of course, you see where the big universities are in the largely populated area in the Netherlands. We have a university here, we have technical universities here. In Belgium there are universities here. In the south of the Netherlands, you see where the clients of EC are mainly coming from university cities. And that's Europe. Now, another question, another thing to visualize, just to get, not necessarily to expand it to the world, but to get insight for the research group, is when do people register and how many times do they visit the archive later on. So what you see here is somebody registered before 2011, because we had a change in the system in 2011. We can't only say that these people were there before the change of the system, and how many last visited before 2011. A large group registered before 2011 and visited before 2011, and a few of them made their last visit in 2012, and a few of them made their last visit in 2050. If we do that for all the years, then you get this, and it's still saying that you can read out of this graphic that a lot of people don't come back over the years. They register in 1 year, this is 2012, and they make their last visit in 2012. So they don't come back a lot after their first visit. There's maybe something to do with the system and how it is organized.
Or every time they come, they register again, because they don't remember. Like
Yeah. They don't remember their name. Yeah, there is a forgotten password service, of course, on the system.
Every time I try to ask.
But you actually check that, and we don't have so many double registrations.
We have not many double registrations. It could be that if you find an interesting data set when looking on Google or on the EASY system, that and you're obliged to register before you can download the data, then people register just to register and grab the data and perhaps never come back. Another thing which I did was taking search terms, having the frequency of words and terms of search that people put into the box. And of course, here is a clustering of search terms. You can perhaps out of the frequency of search terms, you can cluster the users, so eventually you get, for instance, this, and it has a perfect differentiation between the groups of researchers that EASY is servicing. For instance, everything until here is our archaeologists, we believe, because they are looking for archaeological firms that did the excavations. Here we have mobility research, what is the migration, I guess, in the Netherlands. This is living conditions. Here we have sociological data, and you can discern clusters of Second World War, educational clusters. So in this way, you can group people that use the search interface into groups depending on what they are looking for. How much time do I have, Christine?
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
That's okay.
Well.
But plenty of time for discussion.
Okay. Architecture of an observatory. I was creating this slide in St. Louis during a talk of somebody, I don't know. And there should be a lot of other things on this slide, but I thought